Alrighty, booting up the stream. Here we are, episode 54. Happy Monday, and welcome back to the Leonis support, everybody. JB, good to see you as always. What's going on, man? How's the week starting off?
Going pretty good, man. No complaints here. It was Mother's Day weekend, so kind of took a day and took care of the wife and made a nice brunch and had a nice little Sunday. Was Weather was pretty nice. Got outside a little bit and yeah. How about you? How was the weekend?
It was good. Just, the usual gaming routine on Saturdays and some errands and whatnot. But Mother's Day yesterday, went over to my parents and just played some cards with my mom and my girlfriend. And pretty chill day overall. And Uh,
Nice.
we're already halfway through May. I got some stuff coming up over these next few weekends, like graduation season and wedding season's ramping up, and it'll be getting busy. But uh, it's Monday nights. We still got that on lockdowns. That's not going anywhere.
Sundays is too like kind of like a big TV day, like kind of catch up on some shows and stuff. We've been watching this show on Apple called Sugar that we've been kind of getting into.
Hmm.
It's got Colin Farrell in it. I would recommend it. I've been liking it so far.
Oh, I'll
How
throw it in
about
the
you? You
backlog.
you, you checking out any shows lately?
We do for dinner. Suits. We're part of that crowd getting back into Suits.
Okay.
I've never seen it, and my girlfriend saw it how many years ago, and given that a rewatch. We typically do like one, maybe two at a time. We try to do like a drama and then like a sitcom of sorts, just to have like something lighthearted, easy to like watch during lunch
Unwind
together.
too.
Yeah, exactly. But welcome to the
Good
couple of
stuff.
viewers. I see some people chattering about Sephiroth's design, repurposing the skin, throwing a wing on it, and uh, talking about Kadaj. We'll get to a little bit of that, but real quickly, in terms of outlining our topics tonight, we will talk about the live stream last night, just a little bit, our initial thoughts and impressions. We'll look at the roadmap that they provided us to confirm what we knew, if there was any surprises. We'll talk about the English voice actors being dropped, which is kind of a big thing in this last week or so. And we actually have a couple articles here that came out from IGN about the status of Square Enix, which actually kind of coincides with some of these decisions. And then we will go through primarily Tifa and Cloud, who are the new units coming imminently in this next week or so. We'll look at Mont in the top 50 and King Mont kind of analyze how he might have affected the game. And then we are going to do some kind of like think pieces about impressions on him and the next gen meta, because there are some pretty big swings here. We'll look at the stat increases. You did a great analysis on it. And then we'll talk about some of our predictions personally of where we think the game is going and how that kind of affects how we look at things. So, a lot to cover, a lot of good stuff. I wanted to start off first, though, talking about some other gaming. Final Fantasy VII, I hear you're playing the original remake right now at the moment, not Rebirth, but still getting through the remake. Well, how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, since the game was down today, I kind of booted up the PlayStation today and was playing that a little bit. But yeah, for whatever reason, I just I got the game when it first came out back in 2020, during COVID. Got really into it. I got maybe like, I don't know, I want to say maybe three-quarters into it, maybe halfway into it. And then I just put it down and never went back to it. That happens to me often and with games. I'll just get, something else comes along or, life happens and then I just don't pick the game up for a while. But, with Rebirth out now, I had been wanting to play that. So I was like, man, I gotta finish. I gotta finish this game. So I got back to it, and yeah, hopefully we'll be finishing that up this week, and then get right into Rebirth.
Right on. I was a huge fan of Remake, and I actually just completed Rebirth this last week. Remake, I think, is better than the original in so many ways. It really brings a bunch of characters to life. It really modernizes some of the plot lines. It does a lot to like also keep the original storyline there while also enhancing all the smaller things that didn't get there in terms of like some of the NPCs that they've brought in and created out of nowhere. I think they did a good job like fleshing that out. So two enormous thumbs up. I actually also thought it was a great crossover of battle systems where it's kind of this blend of like turn based, but it's not turn based, and it's not just button spam either. There is like equipment that you're still doing for like materia and abilities, level like really good blend of them in the modern era of how they balance that. And Rebirth does a lot of those same things very well. I think Rebirth, I don't like it as much as Remake. Personally, I think there's too many peaks and valleys in my enjoyment of it. Where there's sometimes the game was exceptional, and then there's other times where I'm like, dude, I just get me through this. I'm done. Like I don't want to do this. Uh, but yeah,
Yeah, I've really been enjoying Remake so far, and like the story, there's no skips so far for me, like in terms of, everything has been interesting. The I try not to get too tied up in the mini games, but like there to be honest, it hasn't been like bloated with those, at least for the remake, for the
No,
first one.
no, that are good.
Um, but yeah, I agree. The combat system, I like it much better than 15, which was kind of like the start of this kind of newer style of more action oriented Final Fantasy. 16, for that matter, has some of that too. I think it's even more towards the action side than remake is.
I agree.
But I like remake where you can, you still have like turn-based inputs that you can slow the game down and kind of, do it that way if you want to. And you can kind of button mash it too if that's all you really care about. You can actually beat most of the enemies just by
Yep.
hitting, square repeatedly. So I think it's a definitely a good balance there.
Yeah, completely agreed. I completely agreed. But I know there's a lot of comments already talking about the live stream. That's our first topic up, and obviously we want to talk about that too. I did watch the whole thing. They did not bring Hiroki in. It was Nanami and Justin instead, and they were announcing the Final Fantasy VII Advent Children collab. I know we kind of had chatted a little bit about it on the Discord today for those of you that were around. I know I won't speak on your behalf. I'll speak on mine. I personally underwhelmed by the live streams. I am of the opinion that if you're gonna, what's up, Githro? What's up, everybody? If you are doing a live stream, the purpose is to a either interact more with the people. And that's the point of doing it live. B, there should be a factor that makes it feel real to those watching. That you, it's a little more raw. It's not as scripted. Like we have an agenda, but we kind of like let it take us where we want. We don't have a strong script. But I feel like there's a ton of room for improvement in those live streams where the entertainment value straight up isn't there. And we've said this, like, not like I'm a big Showtime performer either in my reviews. It's me in a PowerPoint presentation. So it's either you have to do something like really entertaining for people to watch, or you have to be the entertainment for them to watch. And I unfortunately don't know if they really do either very well. It's just very, the pace is very odd. I find myself getting bored on my phone for a couple minutes here and there, and you're just, okay, next. And there's just a lot of room for improvement. That if that's the like official stamp of it, I feel like there's a lot of polishing. I think it's a good word that could occur.
I mean, I've felt the same way kind of since they went to this live stream format, which I want to say it's like a year ago, or maybe a little more than a year ago, maybe around like the third anniversary. I don't remember exactly when, but they it, there's a lot of mistakes. It's slow. Like the information is stuff that most of there's no surprises to it. Especially since Road to Worldwide, there's literally no surprises for us anymore, unless it's like a unit that's dropping at the same time as JP, which does happen occasionally. Um, like you said, this time no Hiroki, which he has got his quirky self kind of adds something to it when he's on there, but. I don't know. I feel like they could do more. I agree. They could maybe spotlight the community a little bit. Maybe they could have on content creators to kind of like add some different element to it. Like you said, the audience engagement's not there. There's no polls. There's no questions to the audience. There's not even reactions to things that people are saying, even things like that. So yeah, it doesn't really feel like they're taking advantage of the medium at all. And for that matter, why even do it in the first place if you're not going to? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's my kind of my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I agree. Right. I'm not saying don't do it, but if you're gonna have a script and have a limited amount of information, then just make a video and cut out the pauses,
Yeah.
cut out the stuff that you don't want, make it a final product, or really lean into the live stream and really do something that has some entertainment value and really leverages what that can bring to it. That's yeah, that's my thoughts. So beating a dead horse at that point.
Yep.
But they did give us a roadmap as well, and we will highlight that roadmap briefly here. Let me bring this up. Nothing surprising from what we didn't already really know from that 4 month or 4 week foresight. We're getting Cloud and Tifa and the Vision card associated. Kadaj is the week after with the Tifa Vision card, we call it, or I might have that backwards. No, it's the Tifa Vision card. It's the Luck and
Yeah.
Agility. Sephiroth the week after, and then there's the Sephiroth Vision card after that with a little pause in terms of the character releases. There is some Trials of Reckoning coming in the last week. Not a lot of PvE content from what I can tell in these quests leading up to the TOR. It should be pretty tame. Really just the regular guild wars and whatnot. Maybe they'll implement some class match and quick pick. I don't know if they typically announce that in this roadmap, those kinds of game modes, but right now, pretty pretty par for the course. I don't know if you have any thoughts about this otherwise.
Yeah, I would expect class match or quick pick to be coming here that fourth week of May. Generally, they do it kind of the last week of the month. But it's a big collaboration. You know, there's 4 units there, one of them free, so 3 gacha units, and then 3 vision cards. So that's
Yeah,
that's a lot, especially in the hollow vision card era. So you're talking, 3 units, 120k, 3 vision cards, 60k, so potential 180k there just to acquire the stuff. If you're trying to get everything here,
yeah,
that's a tall order.
it is. And nonstop just asked, is any of the Hollow Vision cards free? And they're not. Tifa is,
No.
but none of the Vision cards are.
Yeah, and that's kind of rough. We had seen that they had done that in the past, like near we got a free vision card, although there's no free unit there, so maybe that's kind of the give and take. But thinking back to like Final Fantasy 7 remake last year for the third anniversary, we got the Tifa vision card.
Yeah,
So they've done it a couple times, but I think because we're getting the unit this time, they're not sort of doubling up on the freebies.
totally. I mean, I will say they've done a good job with these collabs and making them last long enough that I think if you really just are diligent and a little patient, there is more than enough time to acquire what you need, either through the barracks, everyone knows that, but more so the chocobo expeditions every single day if you're really diligent on doing that, and then just making sure that like you don't rush your viz expenditures. Like, okay, just because you don't have all that viz today, you could just wait for a couple weeks and you'd use your future viz for the prior content, knowing that you'll probably have to skip on some things after this collab is done. And so that's kind of where, I know for me, it's been kind of a meme at this point. I've been downplaying a lot of thoughts on this. I've been a little extra critical on this collab than I may have been in the past. And it's really just because we are at that crossroads where it's like decision making time, and not being a prisoner of the moment, which is so easy to do when you have this limited foresight ahead of us. But we will do a little bit of a deep dive in both of those units today. We'll kick things
Well,
off.
but
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
before you move on, just kind of piggybacking on that thought you just had, and if you kind of transpose yourself and think of where we were a year ago, and maybe going into that Final Fantasy VII collaboration, new power creep for the game with Sephiroth and Yuffie coming in. Then, a month later, we get Full Metal Alchemist, and we get units like, Brad and Roy and Alphonse. And if you look back and you say, okay, all those units looked great before we knew what they could actually do, right? And they sounded great. But if you look back now and you could not pull Roy, would you do that? Would you save
Never.
that 30 to 40k? And I
Absolutely.
think like, once we get to the Kadaj discussion, next week, whenever he comes, I feel like that's going to be similar vibes for me, in terms of his power level,
Yeah.
where he's going to end up.
I mean, I've jokingly called him our fourth anniversary Resol. I think it's like the same thing. It's like, oh, the stats look great. This is a great new unit, and it's just no, it'll forgotten in a week. Not really a week. It'll
Yeah.
be longer than that. But yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that point. And I actually jumped the gun a little bit. There are some other topics we want to cover before that. There were actually big waves in the community, namely that the English voice actors have been dropped, and that now all the current content will maintain the voice actors, but in the future all the JP, you know, voice actors will be in Japanese, and a lot of people took that as a signal to um, that the game was ending. Not the case. I also took it as a sign of just being stingy. But we thought this is pertinent to share this today. There's two different articles on IGN today that are about Square Enix and about their performance throughout the year. And I'll be honest, this is one of those things that's like, as a publicly traded company, they have to be hyper diligent on their profitability because the shareholders, your stock price reflects your profitability. Sales wise, it wasn't horrendous, but they took about a 15% loss from a profit perspective. and they are in the process now of doing some restructuring, a bunch of layoffs. They're not necessarily ending things, but they are really like looking at some of their indie divisions that they support, and they're exploring new strategic initiatives about like cross-platform things. Where right now they're kind of siloed on some platforms, which we thought was a perfect like contextual piece that all right, we're cutting voice actors, but it's very clearly not because like it's end of series coming for one of the divisions, but more like no, there's like an increased emphasis on profitability from the parent company, and this is likely one of those things that is just part of that business cycle, regardless of us or Hiroki or anyone. You know what I mean?
I think it's one of those things where, the CEO says, okay, we need to drive 10 or 15% increase in profits right now. It needs to start today. And then all of the, managers below him start divvying that to all their teams. And then you see stuff like, fringe gotcha games or fringe properties get dropped or, closed down. Everybody else is penny pinching on operating expenses. What can we drop to kind of meet these goals to, uh, you know, meet the CEO's, um, sort of targets for us. So I'm sure that that was part of this. Before they even announced these things have already been moving and kind of done internally for some, weeks or months. So, you know, we were already sort of feeling it here, probably even going into last year. And, to be honest, I'm sure that this decision was made some time ago, maybe even during that road to worldwide restructuring, because
Right.
we know that they record these, voice actors months in advance, many months in advance in some cases. So we're probably just getting towards the end of that run where they just had stopped doing this, some months ago, and they just didn't announce it at that time.
Yeah, totally agreed. I mean, they know their numbers internally before they ever publish any public reports, so this is not something new to Square from a strategic uh, decision making process. But nonetheless, I still think it's sad that they've discontinued it. But if that means that the game continues, you know what? I don't think it's going to drastically decrease the quality of the story and writing. Do you know what I mean? Those are things that are independent of the voice acting. We'll probably miss some of it, but it's one of those things you probably watch once and you'll never watch again. So, how much are you like truly missing out from your total percentage of War of the Visions experience? Probably a small percent. I still don't. It's obviously still very sad. I'm not trying to sweep it under the rug. Not a good feeling to have voice acting completely dropped. But if that's what it takes to make the game go, that's what it is.
Per- yeah. Personally, I was a bit bummed by it because I think that the voices did add a certain depth to the game. They added, the personality to the characters that you don't always find that in a lot of gotcha games where, it is usually text driven or maybe it's not translated at all
Right.
for, the worldwide release. So that was something I always did really like about War of the Visions. And, you could give or take maybe some of the voices maybe you didn't like, but some of the characters I actually really liked. Like, I've always
Oh
liked
yeah,
Mont's actor, the Glaciella, Mashri. There's, some of the core characters I've really have gotten to know them over the past few years in the story. And yeah, I'll definitely be a little bit sad when I don't hear those voices in the new scenes.
for sure. And actually, if I could, shout out to Luciano in the chat. Brought up the point I was just about to raise that he plays with Japanese voice actors in most games. Quite honestly, like I do too. There's many games where I'll opt for the Japanese voice actors and just subtitle it. I watch all my anime with subs. So to your point of like missing out on the expressions and the emotions and this and that, I would argue that like yes, we're actually losing some quality English voice actors, but JP voice actors are the bar still in many respects. So I still think you'll gain some of that. It's just not going to be in a way that you're probably used to hearing. So that's kind of my copium on it too.
Yep.
Yep. But that's yeah. Figured a good time to talk about that because that was a pretty big thing to hear from an announcement perspective. But we'll look at the characters that we're getting right now, and we'll start off with Tifa, who is a brand new strike unit added to the game here. She's of the Ice Element, 90 cost unit. Always important to bring that up just for expectation's sake. Another one of these units with a jump of 2. Very overly mobile, strike oriented unit. This is a very strong fan favorite. The artwork in particular, obviously, amazing. And I know right now in JP, she's not got a ton of good positive results. Um, obviously we tend to differ sometimes in our analysis from what JP does. But have you looked at her much either? I know we talked about her a couple weeks ago, but now we have a chance to do a deeper dive. What are you thinking about Tifa?
So I was literally just sort of working on my review for her today and kind of putting things together. So I haven't done my full sort of analysis yet, but I've gotten a good fair bit into it. She's a 90 cost unit. Like she's not and she's I would say she's like an average level 90 cost unit. It's not a two-piece situation where it's, a 100 cost and a 90 cost clothing. She has an interesting niche though. I feel like you can't say that about all units where, maybe they're okay when they first come out and then you just never see them again. This is a unit I feel like she has that AP deprivation niche that she really her whole kit and even her weapon is built around it. And I think that that's really, interesting for some strategies, but you have to kind of be all in on that strategy for it to work. So,
I agree with that. Yeah. And it's ironic because she brings in this 60% unit res crush again, which we kind of like put Mont on a pedestal for. But to be fair, I do think it's a strong part of her kit and what Strike brings, because Strike tends to be very unit attack oriented, Bridal Alaya being the forefront of that. But there has been some game balance changes in terms of Aldo in particular with the CT changes and what she brings with her aura. Strike resistance overall has gone up. Unit res obviously has too, even though there's a little bit of counterplay here for it. I think for me, and I said this before, the main problem I have with Tifa, she's got a lot of good stuff in the kit. It's just spread everywhere, a little too thin, in my opinion. There's a lot of these characters that come out as of late, and you look at these abilities, and you're like, wow, this is like a banger ability. It's just absolutely amazing. And instead, they've kind of like divvied it up across all of them, where you have these varying abilities of, all right, defense pen is on one of these, but it's separate from her unit res on one, which has the frostbite, which is separate from the physical barrier break, which is separate from her limit break, which she has to use a additional turn for somewhere. That like you can't use all four of these at once, and so because you're kind of like taking your time using one at a time, I just think it's not gonna do anything to shake, rattle and roll the meta in a way that some of these other characters have. I think she's a valuable addition to the strike team. I could see her being used in casual play. Absolutely. She's one of these units that is part of the stat power creep. So relative to other units, I think she still has an edge from just a numbers perspective. But in terms of like return on investment, bang for your buck, seeing some great results pretty easily, I don't think that's the case. But she's also the free unit. So, I know that's not a really good excuse because a lot of our free units have been amazing. I don't think she's in that category though.
yeah, so the one thing on the unit res crush, hers is for herself only.
Did I
It
misread
doesn't
that?
yeah, it's just for the cast, right? Or is it? Oh,
I think it's for three.
I take that back. Okay, it is a
Okay.
debuff for 3 turns. For some reason I was thinking it. Oh, that's it. It's the non-upgraded one is just for that cast. That's where I was
Ah,
sort of getting confused there.
got it.
Okay. So yeah, that's good though then. So she has that debuff. There is a lot good there. Like she has an AoE barrier break too. Very,
Right.
very useful. A lot of the units now are getting barrier breaks, so pretty good range on that for her, especially for a strike unit. But yeah, I agree. It is kind of spread thin across the various things. I think the survivability is what's lacking for her. She has courage. She has a pretty good, damage absorption. But I think that she's set up to really be relying on other units to protect those things for her. She needs a courage protector like a June. She needs I don't know. She probably needs an aura tank as well because she doesn't really have much for physical mitigations. She doesn't have wide guard. She doesn't have AoE resistance. She just has a little bit of unit resistance, and really that's it. Pretty good HP though. Like the stats are all next gen. Like this
Right.
is, uh, considerably better stats than the majority of units that have been released in the past. And of the new guard of units that have come in, the small handful that we've seen, she is the most accurate out of all of them, when you consider like a practical build. So even
Interesting.
even better than Mont. She doesn't I think the thing that she's lacking is the additional hit chance on the ability. So I think at the end of the day, Mont is a little bit better, but she is very, very accurate.
You're right. You're right. I underrated that fact. You know, honestly, it typically comes down to because when I think of my a lot of my characters, I pick one passive. I don't always pick the both of them. And so in my spreadsheet, I have her. I think I have her with this 25 accuracy passive, but definitely not both of them. Which you obviously could. That 45% accuracy between the two of these is immense. And I'll be honest, I might have even picked this one and maybe no, I would have picked one accuracy one. So yeah, definitely so. In her 140 ability gets the extra 20% there too. So I think she's also the dexterity
That
chipping
Yeah,
in.
that's what puts her over the top is that her mastery and then the high dex as well that she has, that she's just a little bit better than even Mont's. But
Yeah,
like I said, Mont has the extra hit chance on his attack, so
yeah,
that helps him out.
helps a ton. So yeah, I mean, I think it's all I wanted to cover for Tifa personally. Um, Temper expectations. She's the free unit, slow builder if you want, but I am not rushing this unit or looking forward to really theory crafting with her. I don't think there's much to theory craft with this unit.
I think I'm gonna throw her in the barracks and I'm gonna run the Chocobo missions. And one pro tip for the folks that are watching tonight, and kudos to Emanatus in our guild, Howl. He actually clued me in on this, that I had actually completely forgot about this, that in one of the very first Farplane archive missions, something about Rundal, there in that shop you can actually buy Chocobo tickets, and you can buy 5 of them per day. So I've been using my free Farplane archive key to open up that Rundal mission, get enough for the 5 tickets and start adding those into my bank. And once the collab comes around, those are directly converted into shards. So for the
Yeah,
folks that didn't know about that, definitely start taking advantage of that.
absolutely huge find. Yes, I think it's the Lucia mission, or it's one of those Rundall
Yeah.
ones in the beginning. We'll see if we can find the exact one and post it in the comments after or something after, because that's a very noteworthy find.
Yeah.
Agreed. But yeah, we'll also look at Cloud next, who is obviously like one of the most popular Final Fantasy units around. I do think personally that Cloud is one of the stronger units of this collaboration. He, like all of them, does have a lot of next gen stats. I do think he brings some really interesting things from a survivability perspective with the amount of innate wide res that he has. I do love the two different penetrations here on all on this buff. I mean, it's passive. I'm sorry, this passive is exceptional. Well, obviously you have the upside of more defense pen here if you want it, or more slash res pen here. He's got great vision card support to amplify that too. He's got 20% innately. I love him from the angle not only of greatsword, which is hyper strong at this moment, not only just for vision cards but characters, but I do like him for light teams. I do think like light slashers are still in play. I guess I'll just segue for a moment there, where like, and I say light slashes, but theoretically any light team you could throw Helena in there. But between Lucio the Luminous, obviously Bart's is still a very popular pick. Winged Stern is still used by many, regardless of what happens to meta, and Starlight Elena too. That there's enough like bones here from a light perspective that even that angle, I think your general populace will get a lot of bang for their buck on him. But I think for me, the only concerning thing is the fact that he has literally zero healing or sustain in his kit whatsoever, which is irregular nowadays. Usually people have either a heal back or a regen or a damage absorb or a I don't even know what else you get the point. There's some kind of mechanic of like self sustain, and he's got literally zero whatsoever. And there's one side of my brain that goes, it's kind of risky, but then there's the other side of my brain that's like, but if they're gonna bring curse as a status effect more prevalently into the game over time, he's one of those units that doesn't rely on healing for his survivability and effective HP. So he's one of those units that in a curse driven meta should be proportionally better because he doesn't need that to really do his job. Where he does have a great, um, ironically, like amount of like unit res here. My favorite thing here is the 20. Where are you? 25%. Oh, it's magical damage. No, no, no. Hold on. He has, here we go, physical damage. Reduced physical damage. This is non-dispellable, so you have that innate strength. He's got the permanent 10% here of all physical damage too. So he's got some like innate resistances that with even without that healing, this counter ability is awesome. 70% chance to proc that you'll reduce damage by 40% for slash and missile damage. Obviously, you look more for slash. So like, there's a lot of cool things there from a bulk perspective that I think bode well for him. But I'll pause there.
No, I think that's a great point to bring up about him is the fact that, he is just got a lot of bulk to him, a lot of meat to him, in terms of like the different mitigations that he can, and it's really balanced in terms of he's got stuff for magical and physical, which is really nice. I think it makes him pretty flexible. The the wide guard though, I think is having that built in. This is like area resist 2.0. Like this is just what it is now. Like, they have introduced with cloud area resist penetration. So just having 15 area resist or 20 area resist like our glacialas or rains of the past, that's quickly becoming, even if it's passively on you, that's quickly becoming not as valuable as it used to be. And this is kind of what the new style of that is. He does get more of it on his equipment as well. His sword gives him 15% magical. And then the TOR item that just came out, which is his cell phone, gives him another 15% for physical. So he doesn't even need to use the army plate. You can use that on somebody else if you want to. Does you can use these two unique items to get that additional tankiness for him. So 40% right out of the box, really, really strong, especially against a lot of the meta right now that is using a lot of AoEs like other greatsword teams. If he's going up against like the Monts of the world, he does have that flat physical resistance. I want to say he gets another 10% somewhere on some equipment as well that gets him to like 35%. Maybe that's on the cell phone as well. I don't exactly remember, but
I
yeah,
think
he does have.
I like it. I think cell phone is 10 unit res. I don't know if it's physical damage reduction, but regardless, keep going.
Yeah, I think it might be specifically for him, but yeah, he's got the courage in there as well, so he'll be a good partner for Joom to protect that courage. And yeah, I think him with Joom could form like a pretty nice anti-magic team, because he has that HP barrier. So I think there's a lot of nice things you could do with him. His tankiness is different than what we've been used to as of late. Like you said, a lot of the tankiness has been around self-sustain with heal backs and sort of absorptions and things like that. He doesn't have that, so eventually he's probably going to be reliant on some sort of support unit, and we haven't seen one of those in a while. It'll be interesting to see what Gumi does with sort of like a next generation support unit. Maybe it could be like a sequential abilities type unit that comes in. Maybe in the red mage class, they tend to be a bit more supportive, and greatsword does mix with red mage pretty well. So I don't know. I think there's some stuff to like about him. I don't think that he's the most powerful character of this collaboration. I think that that's Sephiroth,
I agree.
but I don't think that he's that far off at all. I think that he's like, he's right there for these next gen units. I think he's a solid one.
I agree. And something to point out too, he does have shell and shell seal on hit, and he's got that magic HP barrier. One of the things that I'm appreciating, we get so hard focused on magic metas being like the big magic damage dealers, but that kind of damage mitigation is great versus the Oldoas and versus the Volks and versus some of these magic scaling tanks that like do a certain amount of chip damage that you don't really think about. But if you can prevent 7,500 damage from Oldoa, like that's 7,500 damage you prevented. It still has some value there. I think one of my favorite low key things too is these two different abilities here that are definitely worth mentioning. This first one is a dispel of the physical AoE buff that we're just talking about, which is enormous.
Yeah.
Him and Sephiroth both have access to that, which is obviously awesome. To have it on demand, not just a limit break like Joom. This other one here is AoE Res Pen, which we were just talking about. And it's 100% hit chance. So I love this ability overall for just the fact that like there's not a lot of a counterplay to it per se. But I really do, and I was just trashing how much Dispel is in the game, but I really do like this Dispel ability for him. I do think this is one that's going to be used quite often because of the different AoE sizes that we just did an analysis last week on it. This cross shape actually does a fairly good amount of damage because it's one of the smallest of the AoE sizes comparatively. So the AI will use this quite frequently. It will do decent enough damage in this new era of AoE res. I obviously love all the dispels, but I do like this is a reduction of buff efficiency by 50%. So there's a lot of these mid-fight buffs that occur that this is kind of like a really nice 2-in-1 where Shadow Links had it, the bow unit. We never really got to see like the full potential benefit and impacts on a fight. I think Cloud's gonna have way more opportunity to get full benefit out of that. So yeah, 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about that particular effect lately, and kind of where it might see its best use. And I was thinking about more and more we've been seeing like these mid-fight buffs where, like a Mont coming in with his 30 defense pen additional or 40 slash res pen. And that suddenly, even if they're able to get that off a second time after he dispels it, now that's going to be 15 or 20 instead of 30 or 40. So that's actually kind of cool.
Yep.
One thing I saw in the chat, Kitty Law says she didn't know, or they didn't know about the new gen supports since Curse will be everywhere. And at this point, I think we know it's only a matter of time before a new support comes in and is able to, nullify that or dispel it very easily. And that's the day that Sephiroth is kind of trending downward in the meta. So
Yeah, I'll remove
just
curse. Yeah,
just a matter of time.
absolutely. I would agree. Yeah, they'll obviously create a support that is tailor made to get around that mechanic somehow. But I agree. It would take some creativity to do so. If curse becomes prevalent, we're assuming that. Just a spoiler, like curse is not a guaranteed on Sephiroth. We'll talk about this in a couple weeks, and I said this a couple weeks ago. There's some problems in his range between the limit break and the main job and the AI that sometimes curse doesn't land perfectly the way you want, and if it doesn't land perfectly, you'll often lose fights because you don't get that full benefit. So, you know, he has it. Could there be more units that use it? Sure, but this could also be a Frostbite 2.0. Frostbite looked amazing when it came out, and we never really saw like a strong Frostbite meta. Like maybe a couple units was really King Curry in limited stuff, but Curse could come and go just as easily as well.
Yeah, I mean it's not a foolproof one because, like you said, it can be baited. It could only hit one unit that, maybe the other two units are able to carry the fight. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's still going to be good
it
though.
is. It
Either
is.
way.
It is definitely, absolutely so. And yeah, I mean that's all we really want to mention for Cloud. I'm sure there's other things we could obviously dive deeper into, but keeping things moving along, we will look at the Vision card, which we have been a strong supporter of all of these Vision cards. I think the Katana one might be the weakest of the three, but even then, it's still a good Vision card, one that I'm absolutely picking up. But I think this is a stellar, absolutely S tier Vision card being introduced into the game, where not only are you getting the unit res, you're getting the 60% attack, the 20 crit evade, but the merging of these classes is so strong. It's going from Great Sword, Sword Red Mage, and Sword Warrior. There's so many good synergies here from a slash perspective. And the Sword Red Mage, which a lot of these units do have some like roll compression to them in terms of like adding support viability. This is a great arena card for the extra debuff weakening, and it gives you here that I'm a big fan of what this will do for not only mono greatsword teams, because right now greatsword teams do not have a unit res card. They only have regular old Odin, which is fine, quite honestly. That's a totally fine vision card. But this is objectively a massive improvement when you consider the 60% attack to like a triple greatsword team. You're talking like an extra 600 attack you know, or so on your entire team just from this vision card. That big upgrade for them.
I agree. Like definitely a big win for Greatsword. Red Mage as well. They only have one so far, and it was that new Lucio card that just came out a couple months ago. I believe Warrior has a couple of them already, so it maybe not as moving the needle quite as much for them. But in terms of like this card, absolutely love it. The light element really making out like a bandit here with all the units that they have on there. And when you think about light, if you're kind of building mono element, you're thinking of the Bahamut card, and you don't always want to use that, especially with the newer light units have leaned more physical based. Those top three right there, the newest three, um, they don't want to use Bahamut there, in that team. So this card is going to work perfectly for that trio. So if you're just a mono light player, I think you're going to definitely want to grab this as well.
I'm so glad you said that because I mentioned before the monolight angle, and I was saying that irrespective of this vision card, where this vision card is a enormous buff for that monolight team of physical damage units potentially. Yeah, but
And I mean, all of the vision cards for this collaboration are really good, like you were saying. I think that the Tifa one next week is probably my favorite of the three, but I think you could make an argument for either of these, to be honest.
I would tend to agree. There's something about the more niche uh, luck percentages of that card that really give it an edge. But we'll talk about that more next week once we actually get the confirmation of release and whatnot. I know they announced some unique cloud buffs here, but I don't think it was anything crazy. So we'll obviously see what comes live to global. But that's basically it for.
I,
Oh, go ahead.
I feel like the bestows have been a bit more mundane recently than they have been in the past,
Yeah,
where it's been like magic attack or pierce attack. We haven't been getting like, the penetrations or like area resist, unit resist, stuff like that we had seen in the past.
yep.
So I'm wondering if that's kind of a more of a conscious decision that they've made lately, just to kind of not make some cards too powerful. I don't know. We'll have to see how if it continues.
I could see that. Or maybe if they want us to really mirror the JP meta, maybe they inadvertently make something a little stronger than it should be because of a global exclusive effect, and now it's like a can of worms that they have to, think extra hard about.
It's happened before.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly has. But yeah, we'll go into some more of our like hypothetical convos now, where we'll talk about Mont, King Mont in particular, where very very popular unit, very strong unit. I still think for many he can be difficult because of the amount of teams that he has access to, not only in the Sword Knight but even as Earth. A lot of those units have shown their age. They're still fine, but when you compare them to the Jooms and the A2s and the new Powercreep, a lot of those older Earth units are a little more difficult to use overall. But we thought still be worth looking at overall usage, and we like to use top 50 guilds as our barometer typically for like general usage. Obviously, we go a little bit higher when we want to see like more win loss oriented results where things are stress tested a little more. But I'll zoom in here to maybe that's a little too soon. End of April or mid April. Yeah, Mont saw an absolutely meteoric rise here, and is near equal to Jumon attack on top 50. That's basically neck and neck from a percent perspective. Kind of cool to see that. Not as much on defense, and I imagine some of that could be top 10, maybe not Wallingham, where some of those walls really affect the usage because you have 30 different people swinging the usage of a unit. But I don't know if you've looked at this at all. Any thoughts on his utilization rate so far?
I mean, we've got the map bonuses in now for him, so it makes sense. And the thing is, like when you think about some of the predominant teams, he can fit to really most of them. You think about Ice Earth, kind of building around Dark Titan, Dark Golem, and then the Earth Water, building around Dark Siren, and then some of like the Great Sword, Night cards overlap. So those teams, we've certainly been seeing them in the top 5 and 10. Very, very strong teams at the moment. It is buoyed definitely by the power creep, though, and that's something that we've talked about before. Just the pure stat gain puts them, a leg up on the competition. Certainly, there is some units more recently that can still hang, like the A2s of the world, Odoas, but I think as we go forward, we're going to start even seeing some of those units start to fall out, just as more of these next gen units start to come into the fold.
I agree. I agree. And yeah, obviously a little heavier toward the top here in terms of utilization. Nothing surprising there. I think he's one of the most fortunate things about him. You just mentioned it. The element overlap is that when you go either ice or water, Summer Glaciella and Strategist Oldoa are two superb units to pair him with. That it makes the decision which third unit you put in there a lot easier. Where you can go Joom or A2. You go something else, but that's a little less common. But I know there's still a lot of Earth stands out there using King Bradley, who still holds up very well nowadays. He's not ironclad, but he has a job to do, and he typically does that job really well, and then he dies, which is fine. You'll win the fight, but you know, mono,
He,
yeah,
he he still puts out an incredible amount of damage, like especially if the CT manages to line up for him. Like if you have the haste and he gets the CT up, he gets the double turn, and bam, like he can just two turn, these even these Glaciellas and Aldoas, he can really put in some work there. Does have that long range barrier break there on the same calculated rend ability. Very, very helpful to kind of, get those off sometimes before A2 is able to kind of seal off that capability. So yeah, I think he still has a use in the game. Does not hold up as well at all in terms of his tankiness though. He's not going to be sitting around waiting for a heal. He's just going to die.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And yeah, you can see a lot of those teams, shown here. That looking at the top 50 perspective, at least for the ninth, which is the last time this is updated, you're seeing these teams, and the Earth team at the moment has the highest amount of stars. So like that is a still really solid synergy. I'm sure people in the lower ranks aren't gearing for the accuracy of Lucio at the moment, where Evade has kind of bypassed much of the gearing considerations of people, but when not prepared for, certainly is still very lethal. That yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those moments where we just haven't been seeing as much evasion in a while, and it's going to be the next week or two. Maybe he's still going to be able to catch people before they start throwing their Alex rings and Odin's back in the builds, and maybe it doesn't hold up quite as well.
I agree. I agree. And I know we had a piece here to talk about our impressions of him in the next gen meta per se that happens to be forming, where we if we kind of go back toward this meta view, you know, nothing surprising, I don't think, and we can probably narrow this down a little bit to top 25. We'll see a lot of the same stuff, but maybe some slight variations in percentage usage where you're seeing Mont even surpass Joom in top 25. Yeah, have you thought any more about the next gen power creep? I know we've talked about it, but anything concrete you think worth sharing?
I mean, at this point, they're I don't know if there's that much more to say other than the stats are better and the units are better. Like the kits. I wouldn't say that like the ability power creep has really extended that much more since like the beginning of the year, like with A2, 2P, and some of that stuff. It's more like that the kit is in line with what we've been seeing, or maybe even inching up a little bit more. But then the stats just took a big jump, and automatically make these units better, and people are using them because they're getting those results. They're able to handily beat the old units and contend with what other people are playing with at the same time.
Yeah, no, totally. I do think we're also in this like perfect storm of units complementing each other, and that's one of the things that I'm primarily looking for when these new units are released. There's where do they fit into a current team if they're not a carry unit? Like there's some units that come out and you're like, oh my god, this is like S tier level character. You're gonna build around them. But as these Final Fantasy VII units come out, I'm looking at the teams they could potentially be in, and it's like where are the synergies found? Because you look at a team like Joom and A2 and I don't know. Aldo is a good example. Like A2 has the barrier seal; she can protect Aldo's barrier, and Aldo has some self heal, but A2 also has a teammate heal, so she can supplement in between those two. And Joom has a self heal and a damage absorption. So there's a lot of things that like work together really well in synergizing, and that's one thing that I know that I'm looking more at now because I think these synergies you talk about, even like the vision card advantages, the Dark Espers are showing their value here in a lot of these vision card slots. Obviously, some of the job based vision cards are too, but no shock that Water and Ice, which are two of the best benefactors of the Dark Espers, are also seeing that vision card synergy really like propel them upward. That's why I have some hopes for Earth because they've kind of gotten that second one now. That I think that's something to consider too in the future.
Yeah. I know I have seen people kind of talking about in the discords and things like that, that maybe kind of lamenting a little bit, like, oh, just throw the three most powerful units or the three most recent units together and you have like the Exodia team, so to say. I don't know if that's really come to fruition on global. I mean, I think you might have two of those, most recent or top units, but I don't know if like mixing, Mont, Joom, and A2 is necessarily the greatest team that I've ever seen. I've seen people doing it, and I've tried it as well. and haven't liked the results as much as having a more, because I think you lose a bit of your card support there. That now you're going three different elements, and I just feel like it doesn't work quite as well as going with just earth and water, or just ice and earth, for
Totally.
example.
Well, and there's still the whole X's and O's component that we're not talking about. You still, at the end of the day, do have to have good spacing and good positioning, and people not getting out on the side by themselves. And there's still like a lot of those factors that you can throw power creep at a lot of things, but that's still one that you have to always consider too. And as we get more of these units, you're not going to be able to throw power creep at it anymore because you'll be throwing power creep at power creep, but you're not getting that advantage right now, or you won't get the advantage then that you get now, and you'll have to go back to more of that like real like X's and O's perspective. And I know the other downside of doing that, of just like pulling three amazing like current units and slapping them together, is that sure you might see some results now, but you're mortgaging your future. If you're going all in to rush and hyper build three units right now, unless you're going to keep spending and replenishing your Visior, you're not going to be able to potentially lean into anything else. So you're kind of digging your grave in those three units, which is why I'm being a little picky myself, because it's like, okay, yeah, could I pull Kadaj and probably like get a bunch of stars for like 2 weeks? Absolutely. Is that good use of my Viz when I know that there could be another S tier unit around the corner or another Dark Esper coming out or who knows what? Like, no, like in the terms of the long term, I think getting a little too hyper focused on the immediate could have negative effects in the broader scheme of things.
Yeah. And I think kind of just looking at like the puppet master effect and and kind of pontificating on what Gumi is doing at the moment, we know that they've heavily been focusing on Black Mage and then into Greatsword, and those two jobs do kind of work very well together with some of the card overlap as well. But they have also really been focusing on that cold triangle of elements with, ice, water, and earth. And it's only, I feel like we're kind of at the pinnacle of that development. And I think we're going to start to be kind of coming down the hill here very shortly. Maybe Kadaj is sort of the last piece of this cold trunk. Kadaj and Tifa, I should say, another ice water pair. I wouldn't expect to see much more support for those elements, and maybe not even much more support for Greatsword here as we go and push forward into 2024. I'm expecting to start seeing the turn towards the warm triangle of lightning, fire, and
Yes.
wind here,
Yes.
as we move forward. Probably focusing more on katana. Maybe we'll see some bow stuff, maybe some ninja stuff potentially as well, maybe axe. Um, but yeah, I think that this is kind of the pinnacle here for Greatsword and the Cold Triangle.
I agree. It'd be very odd to see them continue to pump out that those things. They've already been to a point where they are the meta. They've been pretty saturated. Um, they've already rolled out enough with those things you mentioned, like Katana and some of these newer units. What was the other class? Oh, goodness. Oh, whatever it is. But yeah, Sword Warrior. They've been doing more as of late.
Yeah.
That, it's coming to fruition. Someone did have a question. I think it's a good one. Where does Cloud fit into the Greatsword team? And to me, there's two iterations. You have a just straight up triple greatsword, which you actually are. Let me filter. This is JP stats we're seeing at the moment. You could go triple greatsword, which to me you're dropping Astrius for Cloud. You're. I think for dropping Astrius, the only thing you're really losing there is the easier barrier break potential, where Astrius does have some good range on that barrier break, and obviously A2 and Joom don't have it, so I think that's one aspect that might be lost. But I think Cloud is superior in obviously a bunch of other ways in terms of more modern survivability. You're not worried about running into a Ashen King Mon who's an Earth unit who will just dominate. Bradley too, that same argument, dominate Astrius, who can easily like one shot, two shot him. And I do think Cloud um, does bring a more versatile dispel. I know Joom has the select two for her dispel, but I like Cloud being that person. That's kind of that X factor. Obviously, we talked about getting healing, and like A2 does have a teammate heal. Is it always going to be on Cloud? No, but like that is like a source of external healing that works together. But you are seeing Astrius as the second most popular triple greatsword here. I do think it ends up being the tank that would likely get dropped, but it depends on where you play. There's no reason why you couldn't keep a tank in there still.
Yeah, I think there's the X's and O's element to it as well when you think about Sephiroth coming in, where maybe you want to start maybe not using A2 in some situations where you're up against Sephiroth, and maybe you want to do like Glaciella and Joom and Cloud, or something of that nature. So I think it adds another tool into the tool belt that gives you more versatility and play more of the matchups rather than some of the things that we've been doing right now.
Totally agreed. Right. It just gives you options, optionality. And that's good for where you play because every rank is going to be slightly different in who you see most oftenly used. I know we just had that conversation not too long ago with strike teams where we had Katone introduced and we're like, well, we already have like five, not five, it was like three really good strike units, maybe four. Where does she fit? And the answer is like, well, she's very good right now, but it just adds a new dynamic to your strike team. That I think Cloud's the same idea. He's just a different option that does something very different than some of the others, operates differently, and yeah, it's a decision you got to make.
Yeah.
But yes, on the topic of the power creep, you did a really great analysis, and I'll pause you too. We were like conceptually talking about this. I've struggled as of late in my character reviews when I do all my stat analyses with all of these bonkers great stats that no kidding these new units compared to the year one units look way better. So every chart I throw up, it looks overinflated exactly how good they are, but really when you compare them to their peers released in the last like 2 months or 4 or 5 months, however you want to go back, it's really not as like egregious a difference. They're really like in line. And so we had philosophical talks about like, do we drop out the analysis of all the old units? I think you said, and you can talk to this in a second here, that you had not included the stats of many of the old units. You went fourth anniversary only. We're comparing, but yeah, what are you thinking? How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, it's funny. You kind of started mentioning this in our Discord chat the other day, and I was like, I literally had just talked about this in my Mont video where I was like, this is sort of the last of my UR average chart. I'm gonna be sort of retooling it in my next video, which is gonna be Tifa. So she's gonna be the first one, and I'm only gonna be, rather than comparing all the units that have ever been released, starting with Tifa, I'm only looking at this new handful of, so far it's been 6 units up through Sephiroth, and just looking at those stats because it's a clear bump. And basically, I had kind of compared these new 6 units to the history of the game, and I think you can show the chart that I put together there.
Yes, so that's
Um,
that's where we're going to segue. Where you had aggregated most of this data in terms of classifying the are these averages or medians? Averages?
Average, yeah.
Average. So you took the average stats of these from year 1 through 4 units, and then the new 4.5 units. And for those of you seeing that they have like let's say Dex one and Dex two, I think you had labeled these depending upon if you had a passive equip. So like Dex one, I think is base form, and Dex two might be if you have a Dex passive. I'll let you talk to that though.
Yeah, so one is going to be the base value, two is the innate value, so including board, and then if there's a third one, that's going to be including passive.
Got it. Got it.
And
Right.
then magic, I didn't include magic because there hasn't been any next gen magic units yet.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
So
I mean, the results do kind of speak for themselves. The most noticeable bumps are the HP percent, where you're getting, the most percentage change overall. And that's even more impactful because that's just HP. We always talk about effective HP. The rise in like all this AoE res, unit res, wide guard, all these newer units have it where the older units don't. So not only do the newer ones have just the flat out more HP, but they also have more mitigation and like counter abilities that reduce damage and other things that really amplify the difference there. Anything else stick out to you in terms of what you saw for like power creep and jumps of the numbers?
yeah, so I mean, if time was no object, I would go through and I would slice up all the units by year because I think that one thing that had steadily increased since the first year of the game, outside of like some outliers like Engelbert and some of the tanks, is HP had steadily increased. So, you know, there I have HP2 as 4,000 for the first 4 years of the game. But if I was really looking at from like Sephiroth in year three until, Helena or whenever, the year four anniversary was, it would have been. much higher than 4,000. It probably would have been closer to like 4,500 or somewhere thereabouts. Because if you think back to like the original units of the game, like your Ketones of the world, your Frederikas, there's a bunch of units that are like sub 3,000 HP or like just around 33,000 to 3,200 that really weigh down this average where you can't really think of many units in that neighborhood over the past year or two. So that's one outlier. The other stats though have been strikingly consistent. Like if you think about like dex, luck, attack, agility, they've all been very, very consistent.
Yep, I would agree. And some of these stats, I think of attack in particular. I think most attack at this point is propped up by equipments and trust stones and espers and vision cards, less about the base stat innately. These small jumps in attack I think are, their percentage is larger, but I don't think they're like necessarily winning or losing entire fights because of them. I think it still comes down more to like how many turns do you get, um, you know, the ability effects themselves, not necessarily like the actual pure attack number. Because obviously you have to think about like modifiers and crit damage and enemy resistance. There's a whole bunch of things that attack doesn't really correlate to a whole bunch of stuff. I did think the interesting thing was the crit hit and crit evade, and even the same thing for like accuracy and evade, where these numbers you can kind of like compare apples to apples. That like a crit hit average increase of 17% is exactly what it sounds like. A new unit on average has like 17% higher crit chance on that portion of it than old units, and that's a fair amount of like damage increase. And the same with crit evade from a survivability. That if you like played out the numbers, like let's say like average damage taken, naturally if you have higher crit rates and they have lower crit evasion, you're gonna just do way more damage to those older units by the nature of the calculation of how often that happens. Yeah. Same with accuracy
Yeah.
and evade. Everyone is 20% more accurate. Everyone's 28% more evasive. Like that's a form of power creep that if you take an older evade unit, that's why we constantly say this. Unless you're bringing like a reincarnated older evade unit where you can like make up for this power creep in your reincarnations, they don't nearly stand the test of time.
Yeah. So I mean it's a small sample size now for these new units. Like I said, it's just 6 units, so these are going to fluctuate a bit. But I feel like the of the units they have put out, the numbers are so similar, like in most of the stats, that it feels like that this new bar has developed, and I felt comfortable kind of putting this analysis together. There is going to be some things that kind of throw it off a little bit when we do finally get a next gen evasion unit. That's going to really amp up like that particular category there, and maybe even extends the differential that we see. Because thus far we've only been seeing bruisers, that they put out.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, it's definitely an interesting development for people like us that like to really dive into these numbers.
Yeah. Well, because we try to I don't know how to say this, like translate the numbers for people. So it felt disingenuous to me to show an evasion chart and to have like these last 5 units be considered semi-evade units, when in reality is they're not, because those same units are more accurate. And so when you're playing a Joom versus a Joom matchup, well, you're not bringing a semi-evasive Joom versus a Joom. She's going to be accurate enough to hit you. So like it's misleading for me to say that these units are semi-evade units when you're taking them against all this new gen where that's really not the takeaway. That's not the case. So it's such like a minefield to try to like, not mislead people on either.
And I mean, you could make the argument that not everybody is playing against those units, or not everybody's playing against them all the time. But I think that there has been enough units and enough popular units that have come out thus far that people have been pulling them. I mean, you saw the numbers there for Mont and Joom kind of topping the charts, even kind of in the top 500 zone. So I think that those units have been popular enough to move the needle for the entire player base, that pretty much everybody is seeing those units on a daily basis.
This is top 100 attackers. Mont's at 36%. That's very high for a newer unit. A2 still at 30%. I'm pleasantly surprised by Aldoa and Glaciella that in top 100 that you see double digit, because Glaciella is limited. You either pulled it or you didn't back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. But oh, the last topic. Again, this is all topical, but we are coming toward the end of where we wanted to wrap up. Predictions on the meta impact of the collab. Do you have any predictions on where some of the lasting effects might be for some of these units?
So I think that Cloud and Sephiroth are poised to make the biggest splashes here. Cloud, like we said, he's got the best team that he can kind of go and sort of hit the ground running with. That greatsword is top of the meta right now. And, I think that he kind of keeps it there for a little while, gives it more options, more, X's and O's that you can do in terms of your matchups and things like that. Sephiroth, I think that he is, like I said earlier, I think he's the most powerful unit of the collaboration, and it's purely just because of his new capability with the curse limit burst. If you are able to sort of harness it well, it's probably one of the most powerful statuses that we've seen come through into the game, probably since Stop. But I mean, the thing is, there's just not a lot of counterplay to it built into the game. Like we don't have TMRs that can nullify it. The cleric job can nullify it with the calamity guard, which might be interesting to see if people bring out their macheries and things like that. But um, yeah, I think until we get some real counterplay for that limit burst, he's going to be a mover in the meta for a while.
I agree, and I'm pretty much on par with all of your thoughts. Where I do think, I encountered this with Helena's release. I underrated how popular people pull just for a unit they like and an element they like, and they'll play it just because. That I think Cloud is in that category of unit that as a light unit and as the protagonist of Seven, that everyone's going to pull him anyway, and regardless of the power creep, there's like a critical mass that when you meet that threshold of enough people using it, it just becomes the meta, whether or not it's actually the strongest. My favorite example of this is oh god, Dragon Quest, Zoma. Zoma.
So
Zoma is an exceptionally good unit and was, but not nearly enough people pulled him to actually ever feel the effect of any kind of meta because you never actually saw enough of him to make people build against him. But he was an exceptional unit that people back then were like, oh, we have reincarnation coming in 140s and they're never going to rerun the collab, so I'm going to skip it, I'm going to pass. But he's a great example of like the critical threshold not being the same as the intrinsic value of the unit. And so I think Cloud's going to be very good because there is going to be that threshold. I think Sephiroth's the same idea. You're just going to have so many Sephiroths, it's going to be the meta because it's a popular pick. I'm sure a lot of people have enough things for Fire, enough things for Katana as of late from a vision card perspective. I don't think Tifa's going to do anything. I think Kadaj is going to be a fart in the wind, literally a nothing. I do think the vision cards, though, are going to have some huge meta ramifications because those vision cards, and I'll just snapshot the Tifa one that you really like, that I do too. This is similar to the Halloween Lucio one, 42% luck and 12% agility. And you're talking to get another great sword card, but Staff Black Mage, which is a inherently like strong vision card in Rainbow Team, and even Fist. Fist is like some of the best vision cards in the game. That I think the vision cards that they're introducing, that these classes will have longer running benefits. You have the accuracy built in here for Guild War 2. That I think these vision cards will be big meta drivers throughout the rest of the year. Don't skip these.
I mean, the other thing we have to think about too is the transition to the 5-man Guild War
Yes.
and sort of the increased importance of, additional vision cards and additional flexibility on your team. Like maybe, Cloud coming in gives Greatsword potentially a nice angle for the 5-man team where, you now have 5 excellent units that you can take advantage of, Astrius, A2, Joom, Cloud, and then throw in a tank there as well. So yeah, that's definitely something that we have to be starting to think about as well, because that is going live here on JP this week. They've been mocking it out.
I'm excited for that too. We'll obviously do our own deep dive on that. We have our own build thoughts, but yeah, it should be good. Crimson Light says Tifa is slept on. I I agree and disagree. I think we all know she's going to be great if you use her right now. She'll be good. I just think it's a tight window, small window.
My take is that I think it can be good in that that specific strategy. Like outside of that strategy, I don't really think it's super compelling.
If I could push back too, he just said giving crush to mono drop strike is low key busted. I'll disagree only on the counterpoint that Oldoa completely busts that team from the CT nullification. I don't think strike is nearly as scary without Alaya constantly applying the CT down. That strike team's not the same without that.
Especially with Mont in the meta as well.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I know we're a little bit past the hour mark. We wanted to keep this short and sweet. I think we did a really good job of covering some of the, hypothetical conversations and game balance stuff that. But we are going to pause here. We have a lot of great discussion in the chats. I'm really happy you guys showed up again. We're going to make this a recurring thing that 9:15 every Monday if possible. I'll try to do a pre-announcement so everyone knows too. Try to get here to make sure that we can capture everyone discussing it because we obviously talk to you guys on Discord and would love to chat more here too live. But any other closing thoughts or things you want to talk about before we sign off?
I don't think so. I mean, the game was down for most of the day. I don't even know if it's back up yet. I haven't been able to log back in and check.
It is.
But yeah, I'm excited for
we matched final boss. We have Guild War right now. No,
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm messing with you. I'm sorry.
It would be a loss anyway. But yeah, I'm excited for the collab this Wednesday, and yeah, I'm definitely gonna go for Cloud, and hopefully it's not as painful as it was for me going for the last one. So
no, definitely. And just to answer Winston in the chat, how do you submit Q&A questions? However you can get in contact with us. If you want to ask it right now, comment section, Discord, fly a plane over our house with a sign attached to it. However you want to ask the question, we'll hear it. And yeah, to everyone here too, always bring the Q&A. We haven't had a good Q&A segment in quite some time, but we love being able to talk about stuff that you guys are curious about. So please always submit those however and whenever you guys want.
100%.
But yeah, that's it for now. We'll call it here. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Always appreciate the support and the engagement. And until then, good luck pulling if we don't talk to you, and we'll see you next Monday.
See you next time, guys.